National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
I think it's all a witch hunt, that's all. I think it's a witch hunt.
A new twist in the Signal scandal. The group chat now public as the White House insists they're not worried. And a Las Vegas man suspected of setting fire to Tesla vehicles now behind bars. The federal charges he's facing as a wave of attacks across the country continue.
I don't think people realize how much this is going to impact them until they come in and they see the change of prices.
Saying yes to a dress could be getting harder. How new tariffs could transform wedding wishes. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton. And on this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. An arrest is made in the apparent vandalism of a Vegas Tesla center. And President Trump announces more tariffs on automakers while floating a deal to speed up the sale of TikTok. Consumer confidence continues to dip amid economic uncertainty. And the federal government pressures universities to take action against the growing number of anti-Semitic protests on campuses. But first, a federal judge on Thursday ordered that the Trump administration preserve all messages exchanged in the now infamous Signal group chat. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt gave a resounding endorsement of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth amid the Signal leak scandal as condemnation for both his and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz's roles in the affair grows. Take a look at your screen if you can here. These now public Signal messages notably include one from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth detailing specific times and sequencing of U.S. strikes against the Houthi rebels in Yemen, written hours before the strikes on March 15th. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins gives us a closer look at the fine print from the White House.
At 11:44 a.m. Eastern, Hegseth wrote, "Team update, just confirmed with CENTCOM. We are a go for mission launch." He then included what some defense experts are saying are classified details about scheduled aircraft movement and target strikes. Hegseth and President Trump have said no classified information was shared, something White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed on Wednesday.
We have said all along that no classified material was sent on this messaging thread. There were no locations, no sources or methods revealed, and there were certainly no war plans discussed.
President Trump later continued his effort to discredit the Atlantic's Goldberg.
I just know Goldberg is a sleazebag. His magazine's terrible. He's just a guy that I never had a lot of respect for.
The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe were pressed for answers during a hearing by a House Select Committee Wednesday. Both Gabbard and Ratcliffe were part of the Signal group chat.
I used an appropriate channel to communicate sensitive information. It was permissible to do so. I didn't transfer any classified information. And at the end of the day, what is most important is that the mission was a remarkable success.
Democrats, however, are not buying the Trump administration's explanations and are calling for heads to roll.
This text message is clearly classified information. Secretary Hegseth has disclosed military plans as well as classified information. He needs to resign immediately.
And that was Kayla Gaskins reporting. Democrats also calling for National Security Advisor Mike Waltz to step down. President Trump has brushed off the situation and is standing by his national security team. New development on Wednesday, police arrested a man in connection with what they call a targeted attack at a local Tesla service center. 36-year-old Paul Kemp faces several charges, including third-degree arson and shooting a gun into a vehicle. During a briefing, investigators revealed new details into what happened.
The suspect then began shooting the surveillance cameras with what appeared to be a rifle. And then upon shooting the cameras, the suspect proceeded to the front doors of the Tesla and he began spray painting the words "resist" across the doors.
And the attack comes amid a rise in protests, property destruction, and graffiti involving Tesla vehicles and centers. The Trump administration is asking the Supreme Court to allow it to go ahead with cuts to teacher training grant money. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the cuts, but the administration wants the high court to let the cuts go forward while a legal fight plays out. California and 7 other Democratic-led states filed a lawsuit challenging the cuts. The Trump administration argues the grants are diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. President Trump has signed an executive order calling for the dismantling of the Education Department. The president announced new tariffs this week that are set to impact car manufacturing, but there's also a chance TikTok could factor in, as the popular social media app is facing a fast approaching deadline to sell or get banned in the U.S. National correspondent Matt Gelka reports from Washington.
The future of TikTok could go hand in hand with tariffs. The Chinese-owned app faces an April 5th deadline to find a non-Chinese buyer or risk a ban in the United States. But the president thinks a deal on tariffs could persuade China to authorize a sale.
Maybe I'll give them a little reduction in tariffs or something to get it done, because every point in tariff is worth more money than TikTok.
The president announced 25% tariffs on imported automobiles along with key parts used in vehicles, arguing it would help ramp up domestic production from automakers with underutilized auto plants here.
We're going to make sure that American workers are put first, and we're ending the unfair trade practices that have been hollowing out our middle class for decades.
The additional tariff on auto parts would likely hit China much harder than the tariff on cars themselves, which is where TikTok comes into play. The New York Post reports a deal is close that would see TikTok's current owner, Chinese-based ByteDance, taking a minority stake in TikTok, while American-based Oracle handles data and other non-Chinese-based companies form a majority stake. The app faces a ban over national security concerns, with claims the Chinese government can use it to spy on Americans. China would have to sign off on a deal.
I'm worried about our country more than anything else with respect to TikTok. And China is going to have to play a role in that, possibly, in the form of an approval. Maybe.
The deadline to find a deal was extended by 75 days when Trump came into office after TikTok was briefly banned. A group of Senate Democrats sent a letter this week urging the White House to work with Congress to pass another potential ban delay, saying the path to saving TikTok should run through Capitol Hill. Next week, Trump has called April 2nd Liberation Day for when he plans to impose reciprocal tariffs on other countries. Then on April 3rd, the new auto tariffs are set to start being collected. And later that week, the TikTok ban is set to take effect on April 5th if there's no deal or no extension. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
Well, if you are planning a wedding, the cost could be going up. That's unwelcome news for any couple planning for the already expensive day. The new tariffs on China are being blamed. The National News Desk, Katie Benoit, explains how the tariffs could impact saying yes to a dress.
This was the previous price. It was $18.99. The new price has been increased to $2,016. This is the price that they told us that we have to charge.
Anita Sarachek of Infusion Boutique says she's been getting a lot of emails from companies that make the wedding dresses she sells in her Warwick store.
I'm sure it will decrease sales overall.
Earlier this month, the Trump administration implemented a 20% tariff on imports from China. Experts say that's where more than 50% of bridal dresses come from.
Last chance, price is going to increase.
Now rising costs are starting to be passed on to customers shopping for their big day.
It's close to 20% increase, and it depends on the brand because some of the brands are really working hard to try to absorb the cost for as long as they can.
Sarachek says there have been efforts by bridal companies to ask for an exemption from the tariffs or move production to different countries. The Bald Hill Road shop does carry some prom dresses made in America. Does the United States have the manufacturing capability to start making more dresses here?
We would all love to see the manufacturing brought here to the U.S. So we would really have to create a pool of people with the skill set to be able to produce these goods. There is a lack of labor here in the U.S., which is why they have had to outsource to other countries.
Sarachek says she's telling clients if you see something you love for your trip down the aisle, don't wait.
I don't think people realize how much this is going to impact them until they come in and they see the change of prices.
Americans don't appear to have much faith in the economy right now. The Conference Board said in its latest survey, consumer confidence this month slid to 92.9. That is the lowest level since January 2021. The survey showed Americans are expecting higher inflation this year, and more are also predicting the economy will slip into a recession. Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are catching Democrats' attention after the two hosted big rallies across the country. The Fighting Oligarchy Tour is encouraging Democratic voters in the midst of what Sanders' aide says is a populist revolt. Sanders' advisors say in the wake of Trump's presidency, the tour is a way to point the Democratic Party forward. They also tell Politico 2/3 of the people who registered to attend his rallies have never donated to him before.
Many Democrats, there's anger, but there's also aspiration. We want to build things like Medicare for all, like a living wage, and a lot of other policies. So you're going to see a new generation come in with a compelling economic message.
Moderate Democrats say they are worried the base of the party could cost them support with swing voters. Are you chasing credit card rewards? Because you are not alone. According to a new Bankrate survey, 4 out of 5 cardholders are trying to earn rewards, and a staggering 72% of adults with credit card debt are actively pursuing them. The Fact Check team's Janae Bowens is here with a closer look at the finances. Janae, so before we get into the rewards, though, how much credit card debt do Americans owe?
Yeah, Dee Dee, so credit card debt in the U.S. has hit a record $1.21 trillion, and the average interest rate is 20.09%, and that's according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York.
Yeah, credit card rewards, that's obviously a perk, but financial experts say that they don't outweigh the interest payments associated with the debt. How many people are struggling to pay off their balances right now?
54% of credit card debtors say it's become more difficult to pay off their debt over the past year. Rising credit card interest rates, inflation, and other economic factors have made it harder for many Americans to keep up with their bills.
Well, a lot of Americans in that situation right now. Janae, thank you. Janae will be back in a few moments with who is most likely to chase credit card rewards. Coming up, push for permanent tax cuts. House Republicans work to put pressure on the Senate to bring tax relief for millions of Americans. And ghost gun regulations are here to stay. Why the Supreme Court didn't overturn the laws. House Republican leaders are calling on the Senate to take up the House-passed budget resolution that would lock in Trump's 2017 tax cuts. Earlier this week, Jan Jeffcoat spoke with Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, to discuss this and more.
So making Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent has been really a priority, as we know, for the GOP. So tell us what's at stake here and why they need to do it soon.
Yeah, the stakes are enormous here. If we don't renew these tax cuts, the average family of 4 making about $80,000 a year could see a tax hike of about $1,700 at the beginning of next year. That would be devastating at any time, but particularly when people are really struggling to pay their bills, to pay their mortgages, and so forth. So we need to lock these in. That will help counteract a lot of the economic uncertainty that has taken place, due in part to tariffs and other policies. That will provide a shot in the arm if we can make these tax cuts permanent, get the economy going back where it needs to be.
Yeah, as you said, this is all to prevent that $4 trillion tax hike on American families. Why, Brandon, is a single big, beautiful bill the best way to do this, do you think?
Well, if you look at the margins in the House and the Senate, but particularly in the House of Representatives, they're razor thin. And while you'd like to think that Republicans would be walking lockstep on some of these policies, that's not the case. You have members pulling in different directions. Some want to see much larger spending reductions and larger tax increases, and some want to go a little bit smaller. So in order to keep the Republican Party together, it's really important to have a unified front here to incorporate all of these good policies here, spending cuts, energy production, and of course the tax policies that we need to lock in and make permanent.
What other benefits would this bill provide?
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff in here. It includes a lot of the president's priorities, energy production being a huge one. That's one way that we really need to tackle inflation, making the cost of energy doesn't just drive down those utility bills. Those products on the shelves at the store that you go by, oftentimes they're carried from place to place by vehicles that are using gasoline. So you reduce the price of gasoline, you reduce the price of energy, you reduce the price of virtually everything in this country. It also contains provisions related to border security, national defense. It's a pretty comprehensive piece of legislation.
Yeah, and back to energy, it's also kind of a national security issue as well, because it will make us energy independent, which we were in the first Trump administration. Are GOP lawmakers, do you think, going to pass this agenda soon? It seems like a no-brainer to get this passed. Why do you think it hasn't been passed so far? What's the holdup?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences of opinion procedurally, policy-wise, and what we're seeing right now is hopefully the Senate is starting to move their blueprint. That could happen as early as next week, according to the Senate Majority Leader's office. I spoke to them just yesterday, and it does look like they are moving closer and closer to bringing a budget to the floor that unlocks this process that we can use for taxes, for energy, for spending reductions, and so forth. So hopefully the Senate is finally going to get there and we can start getting this process going in earnest very, very soon. All
right, Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold, thank you for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jen.
Roughly $11 billion worth of grants earmarked for community health departments nationwide is being pulled back by the CDC. The funds were allocated during the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In a statement, the Health and Human Services Department said it will no longer waste billions of taxpayer dollars. Some organizations say they expect these cuts to result in future layoffs. Background checks will still be mandatory for ghost guns. The Supreme Court upholding federal regulations that require ghost gun makers to include serial numbers on the kits and run background checks on those who buy them. Ghost guns are essentially kits people can buy to build firearms on their own. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris reports.
The legal dispute was over whether or not the kits can be regulated just like firearms. Since 2022, the ATF has included ghost guns within the definition of firearm under the Gun Control Act, and after a 7-2 ruling on Wednesday, that isn't changing. David Thomas, former law enforcement, tells us ghost guns can be very hard to spot.
If it's put together properly, you will literally not be able to tell.
And over the last 6 years, more are starting to pop up. Justice Department data shows 1,700 were recovered in 2017, that number growing to 27,000 in 2023.
If there's a loophole, somebody's going to figure it out, and that's exactly what they did.
Under current ATF regulations, ghost guns meet the definition of firearm under the Gun Control Act, meaning background checks and serial numbers are required.
We're classifying this as a gun. It's a complete kit, and that it's got to go through an FFL. You've got to go through a background investigation. It's got to be completely legal.
But challengers argued the ATF didn't have the authority to apply the law to the kits. The Supreme Court ultimately ruling the regulations can stay in place. Justice Neil Gorsuch writing, quote, "Even as sold, the kit comes with all necessary components and its intended function as an instrument of combat is obvious." Some gun rights groups upset with the Supreme Court's ruling. The Firearms Policy Coalition releasing a statement saying, "We are disappointed with the Supreme Court's misguided decision, but recognize this is only one battle in a multi-generational war over the scope of government and pre-existing right to keep and bear arms." Now, at the moment, it's not yet clear how President Trump will handle the ruling, but he did sign an order on February 7th requiring the Attorney General to review gun regulations during the Biden administration. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
Coming up next on the National News Desk, experiencing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity twice. A spelling bee champion defies the odds for a chance at glory. But what you're looking at right here, the celebration ceremony, the artist behind America's newest stamp reflects on the painstaking process to capture the legacy of an icon. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. And we begin in Foster, Rhode Island, where a middle schooler will represent the state in the National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C. for the second time.
She's just always been significantly advanced in reading language arts.
That leads us here.
Fenestrated.
Fenestrated. Ellie, as her friends call her, is spewing and spelling vocabulary words
Nestience
that I myself would have no idea otherwise.
Huylaga. I just see it in my head.
And this is her regular routine.
Taedium. VITIE.
It all started 3 years ago when she won her classroom's spelling competition.
Once I figured out that nationals was actually a thing, and this wasn't just some classroom competition, this was a worldwide thing, I wanted to get into it more.
From there, she's been getting to the root of things literally.
The words you're saying are of no value if you don't know what they mean.
She's a 3-time district champion who just won the state spelling bee for a second time. Now, she'll be representing Rhode Island at the 100th Annual Scripps National Spelling Bee in Washington, D.C.
There's only 245 kids that make it to nationals.
Very few kids go twice.
And it starts with millions.
For the first time in more than 7 years, Seattle's Navigation Center is quiet.
A relief, big relief, to finally see it closed.
Gary Lee with the area's Public Safety Council hopes the closure of the low-barrier homeless shelter will reduce rampant crime, including drug activity, that he's seen outside the facility and up and down the neighboring sidewalks. King County Executive Dow Constantine said while DESC is better suited to speak to the Nav Center, he did offer this.
We try things. If they don't work, we reassess, and then we try new approaches.
That new approach is the Star Center downtown. All the Nav Center residents have moved here, and the facility boasts big changes, 24/7 security.
In Foxborough, Massachusetts, a local artist, Dale Stefanos, is celebrating the debut of the Betty White stamp, his design for the U.S. Postal Service. The process took about a year to complete, but he says the drawing itself took about 15 hours.
I worked really hard to capture that sort of mischievous humor.
There is nothing more frustrating than waiting for one of these suckers to rise and it just won't.
That slight edge she has, and the youth that was still there as she was aging.
All the attention to detail. A ceremony will be held at the Los Angeles Zoo, where White was an honorary zookeeper and trustee. The stamp is now for sale at your local post office. Coming up next, So Long Park City, the Sundance Film Festival soon setting for the last time in its iconic location. And to West Philadelphia, where he was born and raised, the new tribute to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, a World War II veteran extended an invitation to President Trump to help him celebrate his 104th birthday. In a video that's circulating on social media, Denver Moore addresses the president, saying he would be honored if Trump attends his party. In West Philadelphia, where he was born and raised, now there's a street called Will Smith Way. Philadelphia mayor and city leaders honored the Oscar and Grammy winner on Wednesday, renaming a street next to Smith's old high school. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Massachusetts regulators are now investigating Robinhood over its launch of a prediction markets hub. It allows bets on everything from basketball games to interest rate cuts. The Secretary of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts sent a subpoena to Robinhood on March 20th. It wants Robinhood to provide information by April 3rd about state residents who request to bet on college sports and internal company communications the hub's launch. New details: the sun is setting on the Sundance Film Festival's time in Park City, Utah. After being held there for more than 40 years, the annual event will move to Boulder, Colorado in 2027. Last spring, the Sundance Institute announced it was looking for a new host city for the festival, and Boulder beat out the other 5 finalists. Institute officials said they assessed various factors like city infrastructure and event capabilities before making their selection. Coming up, Facebook freshens up by taking you back in time. The new update coming to the social media platform and why its creator says there are more to come. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News. Now, catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
What about free speech? What about due process?
Crackdowns on college campuses continue. The latest threat made by lawmakers as they look to restore order to universities nationwide.
What we're focused on is to make sure, again, that every child has the opportunity to learn.
On the chopping block, Congress takes aim at America's biggest public media outlets. Why the effort to save Elmo could be a losing battle. Then, the grave new threat uncovered in the investigation into firefighter uniforms. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, as I come back on the air, hello, I'm Dee Dee Gatton. On Capitol Hill right now, lawmakers, they are piling on the pressure for college campuses to take more aggressive action against what they see as growing anti-Semitism on college campuses. With more than 300 foreign students already having their student visas revoked, other lawmakers warn of a dangerous campaign to suppress free speech and silence any and all criticism of Israel. Here's the National News Desk, Christine Frizell.
The latest chapter of the college campus crackdown playing out in videos like this, showing Tufts grad student Ramisa Osterk detained by ICE agents on the street. Hers followed the arrest of Mahmoud Khalil, both targeted for their roles protesting Israel's war in Gaza.
Free Palestine!
Their arrests prompting new protests.
What about free speech? What about due process?
Secretary of State Marco Rubio reportedly using AI to pull visas from students who appear, quote, pro-Hamas, implementing a strategy he called for as a senator.
A foreign national on a visa who supports Hamas, that person's visa should be canceled and they should be removed from the country.
At least 60 colleges already put on notice of anti-Semitism investigations by the Trump administration, with threats to pull funding, as it already did at Columbia, which has since agreed to make major changes.
If universities refuse to follow the law, to address discrimination on campuses, and to support Jewish students, then they should not expect the support of the federal taxpayer.
This Senate hearing focused on anti-Semitism on college campuses, which critics say has run rampant since Israel's war in Gaza began.
Students have been physically threatened, spat upon, had their mezuzahs ripped from their dorm doors, even faced academic retaliation for their Jewish identity.
Progressive lawmakers sounding alarm bells about students being labeled as pro-terrorist for protesting a war that's killed more than 50,000 people, the majority women and children.
To attack the Netanyahu government for their outrageous activities in Gaza does not make one an anti-Semite.
We're also learning the Trump administration is now considering decertifying certain colleges and universities they deem to be, quote, pro-Hamas from being allowed to accept any foreign students. Those who attend with student visas are a major source of revenue, so blocking them could be detrimental. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
Massive job sweeps across the federal government continue, this time with a new plan. The Washington Post reports that a White House document says agencies are preparing to cut up to 50% of the workforce, though officials stress numbers could change. The document covers 22 agencies. One agency, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, may cut half of its 8,300 staff. It's not clear if or when the cuts will go into effect. And the U.S. is facing a potential financial crisis, and the clock is ticking. According to a new CBO estimate, the country might not be able to pay its bills by late summer if the nation's debt ceiling isn't addressed soon. On January 21st, the U.S. reached its $36 trillion debt limit, which led the Treasury to use extraordinary measures and cash on hand to prevent a default. GOP members of Congress can raise the debt ceiling using the reconciliation process, but pushback from within the party has made things difficult. Another option is for Republicans to work on a deal with Democratic lawmakers like they did in 2023. This week marked 1 year since a cargo ship collided with the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. A group of 6 Latino immigrant construction workers were killed. Today, Maryland officials took a moment to remember those men earlier this week.
What happened on March 26, 2024 is and will always be a tragedy beyond words. And to the families of the victims that are with us today, there is little that I can say to truly be the balm for the pain that you feel.
The collapse also shuttered the Port of Baltimore for months and has since snarled Baltimore traffic. Federal investigators say the bridge, like many others in the nation, didn't pass a vulnerability assessment. A new, taller bridge should be finished in 2028. The two biggest public broadcasters in the country could be on the chopping block for federal funding. Congressional Republicans accused NPR and PBS of bias. National correspondent Matt Gelka reports from Washington.
Republicans in Congress want to cut funding to America's biggest public media outlets, a decades-long effort that could be a reality with control of Washington. They brought in the heads of both PBS and NPR to defend why they should continue to receive taxpayer dollars and accuse the broadcasters of bias and indoctrination.
NPR and PBS have increasingly become radical left-wing echo chambers for a narrow audience of mostly wealthy, white, urban liberals and progressives who generally look down on and judge rural America.
Billionaire Elon Musk, who spearheads the Department of Government Efficiency, has called for NPR to be defunded. Both NPR and PBS get money from the congressionally funded Corporation for Public Broadcasting. The nonprofit got around $500 million last year, with about 1% of NPR's funding coming directly from the government and about 16% of PBS's funding coming from those dollars. Democrats mostly mocked the GOP narrative while highlighting the free educational programming both broadcasters provide.
A large majority of Americans say they trust PBS. And that's exactly why extremists are trying to tear it down. Fire Elon Musk and save Elmo.
Republicans hammered away at the question of bias, including not giving enough coverage to the story on Hunter Biden's laptop.
Was that a pure distraction story?
Our current editorial leadership believes that that was a mistake, as do I.
While the public broadcasting executives made the case their broadcasts benefit the greater good.
What we're focused on is to make sure, again, that every child has the opportunity to learn.
The president said this week he'd love to end federal funding for public broadcasting, saying there's already enough media coverage and it's a waste of money. Reporting in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
On Thursday, a county clerk in New York refused to file a more than $100,000 judgment from Texas against a doctor accused of prescribing abortion pills to a woman near Dallas. A Texas judge ordered last month that Dr. Margaret Carpenter must pay the penalty for allegedly breaking New York's law by prescribing abortion medication via telemedicine. Texas's Attorney General Ken Paxton was outraged by the clerk's refusal and plans to take action. New York Governor Kathy Hochul praised the refusal, saying New York is grateful for his courage and common sense. Total home sales reached 4.7 million in January, according to economists from Wells Fargo. That's just slightly above the rate experienced in the wake of the Great Recession between 2008 and 2010. Still, they note the broader economy remains strong. The U.S. housing market has been in a sales slump since 2022, when mortgage rates began to rise from pandemic-era lows. Facebook is trying to get back to its roots by launching a Friends tab. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg says it's a way to revive the original spirit of his social networking app, as he calls it, OG Facebook, when you only saw friends' status updates rather than recommended content. Zuckerberg said back in January that he believes there are a lot of opportunities to make the app more culturally influential than it is today, and that more updates are coming soon. Credit card rewards are widely popular, but Bankrate experts say that 72% of adults with credit card debt that are actively pursuing credit card rewards are actually making a mistake. The Fact Check team's Janae Bowens is back to discuss. We know these rewards are great, Janae, but only if you're able to pay in full and avoid that interest. Who is most likely to go after those rewards?
Yeah, Dee. So Bankrate found young people in higher income households are more likely to chase rewards. Experts say if you're only using your credit card for necessary expenses like groceries and gas, it makes sense to earn cash back or travel points. However, if you're focusing on maximizing rewards to the point where you can't afford the purchases, the interest accrued on an unpaid balance will quickly overshadow the rewards.
So obviously the trick is to stop spending, right? Yeah. But for those who are in trouble, what do financial experts recommend?
Yeah, so experts say you must make a debt repayment plan. The next tip is to avoid using your credit card until your balance is zero. Last tip, consider credit counseling. They may be able to negotiate a lower interest rate.
Good strategies. They may make a difference. Yeah. Thank you, Janae. And for more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to their sources, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the continued fallout from the Signal group chat scandal to the reciprocal tariffs President Trump is threatening to unleash next week.
Welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. D.C. consumed by the controversy over how a journalist was added to a group chat on Signal between top national security officials that included discussion of potentially classified military strikes. National correspondent Kayla Gaskin, should we expect any formal investigations into what happened here?
Well, Steve, something that Republicans seem to be on the same page about is figuring out exactly what happened here. And they've all, at all different kinds of levels, called for investigations. Now, specifically looking at the Senate Armed Services Committee and the leader of that committee, Chairman Roger Wicker, who formally asked this week the White House for an Inspector General report into what exactly happened in what's being dubbed Signalgate. Now, an Inspector General report will be an independent investigation. And then Senator Wicker would like the findings of that report to be handed over his committee for them to be able to review. Now, he, as well as the ranking member, Democrat Senator Jack Reed, have also asked for a closed-door classified briefing on this. We were actually in the Oval Office with President Trump this week, and I was able to ask him if the White House would agree to those.
Senate Republicans have said that they have formally asked the administration for an Inspector General report on the Signal issue. Will you agree to that?
It doesn't bother me. I don't know. want to find if there's any mistake or if a signal doesn't work. It could be the signal is not very good.
Now, Democrats, of course, being much more aggressive when it comes to what they're calling for in the fallout of this scandal. Representative Ilhan Omar has actually suggested looking into impeaching some of the officials that were involved in Signalgate, specifically Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Walton, CIA Director John Ratcliffe. And this would be the most aggressive measure so far that's been mentioned by Democrats. They've also been asking for resignations, Steve, but it probably won't get to that level, at least not to the impeachment level. And Democrats are also accusing Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard of lying this past week when they were asked before hearings on national security, both in the House and the Senate. Democrats not very happy with the answers that they gave during those hearings regarding this now infamous group chat.
Yes, and as much as the president and his team want to move on from this, I suspect we'll be hearing a lot more about this in the coming days and weeks. Meanwhile, President Trump touting Wednesday is, quote, Liberation Day, when his reciprocal tariffs are set to take effect. National correspondent Matt Galka, what can we expect?
Yeah, Steve, Liberation Day, the long-promised day for reciprocal tariffs on other countries. And, of course, President Donald Trump has made it clear he's a big believer in tariffs, whether he actually believes that they will bring down costs in this country or he sees them as a negotiating tool. He has been talking about them since he's taken office. And the president says these tariffs are necessary because he does believe the USA is getting ripped off by other countries and their trade deals. Now, you ask, what can we expect? Well, it's unknown, really, about the true size and scope about what we are expecting with this Liberation Day announcement. The president promises it'll be reciprocal tariffs. Well, they'll be on all countries, but he also said this week they might be a little more lenient. Now, the promise of tariffs have over the past month or so really made the stock market go on a little bit of a roller coaster. And these April 2nd tariffs, they're also different than promised 25% tariffs on imported automobiles and auto parts. So it's a big week next week for tariffs, with critics saying all of these things, they're just going to make life more expensive for everyday Americans.
Yes, a lot of folks watching across the globe and definitely on Wall Street. We'll see what happens on Wednesday. This past week, President Trump signed an executive order that makes some significant changes to voting in federal elections. National correspondent Christine Frizzell, tell us about that.
Yeah, ever since Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, he's been talking about election fraud, suggesting that undocumented immigrants have been going to the polls, even though there's no evidence of that happening, certainly on a widespread level. So he's going after this in a new executive order. It requires a proof of citizenship when you go to register to vote. So that's a U.S. passport, a military ID, or a government-issued photo ID. In his executive order, a birth certificate is not listed as one of the accepted forms. There's some other things with this executive order as well. If you prefer to vote by mail, well, your ballot will need to be in by Election Day, not simply postmarked, as is the law in about 23 states. It also seeks to prevent foreign nationals from contributing in U.S. elections. So it really does a lot of things when it comes to our elections. Let's remember, voting by non-citizens in any federal election is already against the law. Several states have it in their constitutions. A lot of people, though, concerned that this is going to disenfranchise voters, particularly in low-income or rural areas, people who just don't have driver's licenses or passports. So there's going to be legal challenges to this.
We'll be watching very closely. Christine, Matt, Kayla, as always, excellent work. Love the hard work. Thanks. Back to you.
There is a new layer in the fight to protect first responders from cancer and chronic diseases that run rampant in the fire service. Spotlight on America has been reporting on toxic chemicals in the gear that firefighters wear to emergency scenes. But new science shows toxic chemicals in their station uniforms, ones they wear all day, that could make the threat even more grave. Lisa Fletcher reports.
For Fire Lieutenant Brian Goodman, there was a breaking point.
I mean, everybody has a point where they're just like, why are we going to so many funerals? Why are we burying so many of our brothers and sisters?
And why are so many young firefighters like Brian suffering from life-changing medical conditions linked to the gear they wear? For Brian and his wife, it meant losing the chance for a family they'd always dreamed of.
What was that like for you, wanting to be a dad and then finding out that you were irreversibly infertile?
You know, it was hard. But in the back of my mind, the one thing that I wanted to do was fix this the best the way I could so that nobody else would have to deal with that.
Brian attributes his infertility to exposure to PFAS, toxic chemicals found to be embedded in firefighting gear, also scientifically linked to cancer and chronic disease. Brian's PFAS levels were 166 times higher than average, but he believes his exposure wasn't limited to the gear he wore to fight fires. He and fellow Virginia firefighter Charlene Beach made a chilling discovery. They tested their everyday station uniforms for dangerous chemicals and found some of them embedded with PFAS, as well as other hazardous materials like heavy metals and brominated flame retardants.
How often is a firefighter in the station uniform?
24 hours.
Your body does not have a way to detox or get rid of these chemicals and things that are lingering in your body. It's just building and building and building until your body goes, I can't deal with it.
But it's also sort of odd that we have to poison somebody before it gets taken out of service.
Dr. Graham Peasley conducted the tests on Brian and Charlene's uniforms. He was the first to discover the toxic chemicals in turnout gear in 2018. His latest research now warning firefighters of this new risk.
What was the most concerning thing that you found in the station wear?
We found some of the ancient flame retardants of brominated flame retardants. Some heavy metals seem to be quite prevalent in some of these materials. And so I think the metals scare me the most.
And Peasley says absorption of those chemicals increases if firefighters leave their uniform on under their firefighting gear.
Everything is affected by heat. And so if that gear was worn under their gear and they perspire more and heating up, their pores may open and that may make more go through the skin.
This is what we made.
Back in Virginia, Brian and Charlene aren't waiting for the industry or laws to protect their brothers and sisters.
We looked at other companies out there that were already in existence to see whether or not we could find PFAS-free, chemical-free stationwear. The answer to that question was no. Nobody was doing it. Nobody was making it.
So they did.
It's better all the way around.
With hopes that new awareness brings a safer future.
And once it gets out there and fire departments actually start reading the research, I think it'll be a game changer, because once you know, you can't hide the fact that you know it, and you have to act.
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Still to come, concerned Americans sound the alarm. The rally to ensure a vital government program isn't overlooked. Surveillance video of a brazen smash and grab at a Virginia gun store that police say landed 2 teens behind bars. The search for a third suspect. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. And we start in Virginia with a gun store smash and grab caught on camera.
A jarring moment captured on surveillance video in Fairfax County. An allegedly stolen truck rammed into a gun store, masked thieves running in with bags, breaking glass, and helping themselves to as much of the merchandise as they could get.
Let the ages of the two that we apprehended last night sink in a little bit. 16 years old.
16.
Fairfax police announcing the arrest just this afternoon, hours after the brazen break-in happened. In total, authorities say 21 guns were taken. 8 of those are still on the streets, as is a member of the crew allegedly responsible.
I think people are terrified that that's going to go away. It's just not going to be there.
The Trump administration said it will not cut Social Security in one of its fact checks, but this crowd does not believe that.
I'm ready to go to get mine on Wednesday, and it better hit the bank.
Rumors right now point to payments not going out as scheduled due to actions by the president's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, working to stop fraud within the system.
Yeah, there's a smidge bit of fraud, but in no way, shape, and form does this really justify the all-out attack on Social Security. Less than 1% of payments by Social Security are fraudulently accessed.
That 1% would equal about $13 billion a year, but the White House says the Social Security Administration sent about $72 billion in improper payments out in recent years. That's an average of just $9 billion annually.
Don't wait for it to hurt until you get out here.
We first told you about Michael Wilkinson's ailing heart in November. He's been dealing with heart problems for the past 14 years. On March 12th, he made the heart transplant list. 13 days later, the wait was over.
A very sad and tragic day for one family, and a very stressful, exciting, and hopeful day for my family.
Michael was in surgery for 14 hours. His wife, Tiffany, was anxious to see him in recovery.
They said there were no complications, that everything went okay, but there was just a little more work that needed to be done than the average.
Coming up next, summer vacation right around the corner. How taking your family on a trip to the most magical place on earth could score you a discount. This summer, Walt Disney World is reducing the prices of children's tickets by 50%. Kids 9 years old and younger will be eligible. The offer only applies to trips lasting 3 days or longer. The deal goes into effect tomorrow and will be valid through September 20th. That'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week.